It's officially time for the NBC Sports College Basketball Preseason Top 25 to be revealed. A couple of quick notes about how these rankings were put together. Travis Hines, Scott Phillips, Raphael Johnson and myself all filled out our own individual Top 25 poll. Those polls were combined and voila, the NBC Sports Top 25 came to be. The 5 teams that received votes but didn't make their way into the actual Top 25 were Providence, Oregon, Rhode Island, Michigan and Virginia Tech. Drop us a line in the comments or at CBTONNBC if you disagree with any of the rankings. So let's get into it. Here is the top 25. 1. Michigan State Spartans. Who's gone? Aaron Harris, Alvin Ellis. 3. Who do they add? Jaren Jackson, Xavier Tillman. Projected starting lineup: Cassius Winston, Josh Langford, Miles Bridges, Jaren Jackson, Nick Ward. More the enigma of Miles Bridges. Contender Series. Michigan State Big Ten Preview. What we like. We can't talk about Michigan State without first mentioning Miles Bridges, who was named the NBC Sports Preseason National Player of the Year after making the decision to put the NBA draft off for a year and return to school. A freak athlete with perimeter skill and positional versatility, he is the most valuable player in college basketball this season when you factor in his skill on the offensive end of the floor and the versatility he provides defensively. But he's far from the only weapon that Tom Izzo will have at his disposal. There is Nick Ward, who averaged 13.9 points and 6.5 boards in just under 20 minutes last season. There is Jaren Jackson, a 5-star prospect and the perfect fit at the 4 alongside Ward and Bridges. But perhaps more than anything, the best thing you can say about Michigan State is that last year's promising freshman class are all now sophomores. What we don't like: Michigan State's guards concern me. Cassius Winston is a slick passer that was awful turnover prone last year. Tum Naren is a speedster that doesn't really do much else, and Josh Langford is talented and made perimeter jumpers last year, but he must improve on his consistency. Throw in Matt McQuaid in this group is far from bad, but if there is a weakness that can be attacked on my pick to win the national title, this is it. I'm also curious about how Bridges is going to be used this season. He played as a small ball 4 a year ago. This year, he'll be at the 3 full-time. He's good enough that it shouldn't make much of a difference, but, as we touched on in this story, it's something to monitor, too. Duke Blue Devils. Who's gone? Jason Tatum, Harry Giles. 3. Luke Kennard, Frank Jackson. Who do they add? Marvin Bagley. 3. Gary Trent Jr., Wendell Carter, Alex O'Connell, Trevin Duval, Jordan Tucker. Projected starting lineup: Trevin Duval, Grayson Allen, Gary Trent Jr., Marvin Bagley. 3. Wendell Carter, Grayson Allen, Gregory Shamuskati. Images. What we like: Coach K has the most talented starting 5 in college basketball at his disposal. Thinking about it, Duke has the class of 2017's top power forward who doubles as the best player in the class and a potential number 1 pick in 2018 in Marvin Bagley. 3. They have 2017's top point guard recruit in Trevin Duval, the second best center in Wendell Carter, and a 4th 5-star in Gary Trent Jr. that some rank as 2017's best shooting guard. All of that is before you factor in senior and a former second-team All-American and last year's preseason National Player of the Year Grayson Allen. Coach K has told us that Allen is finally healthy after getting surgery on a bum ankle. They're still flawed, we'll get to that, but to me they're the most talented team in the country. What we don't like: I am not convinced that Duval is the point guard that this group needs. He's a terrific talent, but he's not necessarily a guy that makes teammates better, and he's yet to spend any time as a facilitator at any level. Think about it like this: Duval could end up being the 5th best defensive weapon that the Blue Devils will have at their disposal. His job will be to run the offense and distribute the ball, not to shoot 15 times a night. And speaking of shooting, Duval has yet to prove that he is the kind of floor spacer Duke will need. Ever since Tyus Jones left, Duke has had issues at that spot, and I'm far from convinced that won't continue this season. 3. Arizona Wildcats. Who's gone? Lauri Markkanen, Kadeem Allen, Kobe Simmons, Chance Comanche. Who do they add? DeAndre Ayton, Emmanuel Ackett, Brandon Randolph, Ira Lee, Alex Barcelo, Dylan Smith. Projected starting lineup: Parker Jackson Cartwright, Alonzo Trier, Raul Elkins, DeAndre Ayton, Dushan Ristic. What we like: the amount of talent that Arizona has on their roster is impressive. The Wildcats will not only roster a preseason first-team All-American and a guy that could potentially lead all of high major basketball in scoring in Alonzo Trier, they will pair him with freshman big man DeAndre Ayton, who just so happens to be the potential number 1 pick in the 2018 NBA draft. Raul Elkins is back, battling a foot injury, but still back, and Emmanuel Ackett, Brandon Randolph, Ira Lee and Alex Barcelo round out a very good recruiting class. But there's more than just talent here. Arizona will likely be starting a senior at the point in Parker Jackson Cartwright and a senior at center in Dusan Ristic. More than any other team near the top of the polls, Arizona can blend elite talent, experience, depth and coaching. What we don't like: there are three major concerns with this group. The first is Alkin's foot injury. He's a scorer and a high-volume shooter, meaning that implementing him into the team isn't going to be easy once rotations and roles have been defined. Then there is the question about whether or not Jackson Cartwright is the answer at the point. Sean Miller has had two tough-minded, defensive-oriented leaders running his program the last 4 years, and PJC has yet to prove that he falls into that category. The biggest issue, however, is the looming FBI investigation into corruption in college basketball. Assistant coach Buck Richardson has already been fired. Another former assistant appears to be implicated, as well as two current players on the roster, although they are unnamed. Keep an eye on that. 4. Kansas Jayhawks. Who's gone? Frank Mason. 2. Josh Jackson, Landon Lucas, Carlton Bragg. Who do they add? Malik Newman, Billy Preston, Marcus Garrett, Sam Cunliffe. Projected starting lineup: Devontae Graham, Malik Newman, Sviatoslav Mikhailiuk, Billy Preston, Udoka Azubuike. What we like: I don't just like, I love the Kansas backcourt. Devontae Graham is finally going to have a chance to handle the point guard role full-time, and it should come as no shock to anyone if he ends up being an All-American come season's end. He'll be joined by a former five-star recruit in Malik Newman, who looks like the odds-on favorite to end up as the leading scorer for the Jayhawks this year. Svi Mikhailiuk and LaGerald Vick are both back, while Marcus Garrett and Sam Cunliffe, who will be eligible in December, join the fray. This group is deep and talented, and if Kansas is going to go as far as the Final Four this year, will need to be the backbone that anchors this team. What we don't like: this is a weird roster construction. I'm not sure how else to put it. For a program that has thrived using 12 big lineups and running a high-low offense, the Jayhawks, just like last season, has a total lack of depth on the front court. Udoka Azubuike is healthy after breaking his wrist last season. Billy Preston is a five-star freshman that should have an immediate impact on the front line, and Mitch Lightfoot is a four-year guy that will be asked to play a role he may or may not be suited for. That's it. The problem is that, unlike last year, Kansas doesn't have a Josh Jackson, a guy they can plug and play as a small ball four. I'm not sure what exactly Bill Self is going to do with this group, but he's going to have to find a way to fill that hole at the 4 spot. 5. Villanova Wildcats. Who's gone? Josh Hart, Chris Jenkins, Darrell Reynolds. Who do they add? Jermaine Samuels, Colin Gillespie, Dahmir Cosby, Roundtree, Omari Spellman. Projected starting lineup: Jalen Brunson, Phil Booth, Dante DiVincenzo, Mikal Bridges, Omari Spellman. What we like: everything about the program at this point. I'm not sure what else there is to say about Villanova. Their point guard, Jalen Brunson, turned into one of the nation's best by the end of last season, and there's no reason to think that he can't build off of a strong finish to Big East play. There isn't anyone in the country better to lead a team than Brunson, particularly a program like Villanova. What I mean by that is that egos are prevalent on this roster. Recruits know that they may not play the second they arrive on campus, but as long as they put in the work and keep getting better, they will be able to fill a role when their time comes. That's why, despite the loss of Josh Hart and Chris Jenkins, no one is predicting a drop-off. Because Dante DiVincenzo is ready for a bigger role and Omari Spellman is improved after a redshirt year. Phil Booth is back, as is Mikal Bridges and Eric Paschal. As long as Jay Wright is on the sidelines, Villanova's name will show up at or near the top of every preseason top 25. What we don't like: the biggest concern with Villanova is probably a lack of high-end talent and playmakers outside of Brunson. We know they're going to be tough to defend. We know they're going to execute offensively. We know Brunson is going to be awesome. But on the nights where Brunson is taken away and the Wildcats are struggling to find a rhythm offensively, who can step up and get 18-22 points? Put another way, rare will be the night where Villanova's plan A gets slowed down, but when it does, who do they go to? 6. Wichita State Shockers. Who's gone? No one. Who do they add? Samaje Haynes-Jones, Asbjorn Midtgaard. Projected starting lineup: Landry Shamet, Connor Frankamp, Zach Brown, Marcus McDuffie, Shaq Morris. What we like: the thinking with Wichita State is pretty simple, really. This is a program coming off of a 31-win season that earned them the number 8 spot in the final Ken Palm rankings, the kind of advanced metrics that spawned dozens of columns about how, as a number 10 seed, Wichita State was the most misseeded team in NCAA tournament history. And that team is, with the exception of a backup point guard that averaged less than 15 minutes last season, entirely intact. Landry Shamet is back. Marcus McDuffie is back. Darrell Willis and Shaq Morris and Connor Frankamp are back. perhaps most importantly, Greg Marshall is back. The only difference, what we don't like, is that the Shockers are now a member of the American instead of the Missouri Valley. And frankly, I'm not all that worried about the bump up in league. The Valley is never easy, but I am worried about the difference in travel. Instead of having to go from Wichita to Missouri or Iowa or Illinois for league games, the Shockers will now be traveling to places like Storrs, CT, and Florida. It's not just the distance, either. Now, instead of getting 34 days in between league games, Wichita State will be at the mercy of the Americans' TV deals. A Thursday road trip leading into a Saturday afternoon game is not ideal. But that's the second biggest issue currently facing this team. As it stands, the two best players on Wichita State are still recovering from foot injuries. Shamet should be ready to go by the time the season starts, but McDuffie could be out for a month of the season. Maybe more. Put another way, Wichita State is ranked where they are based on the idea that they'll be back to full strength when it matters. 7. Florida Gators. Who's gone? Casey Hill, Canyon Berry, Justin Leon, Devin Robinson. Who do they add? Isaiah Stokes, Yegor Kolichov, Chase Johnson, Deandre Ballard, Michael O'Cowrook, Jalen Hudson, Dante Bassett. Projected starting lineup: Chris Chioza, Kayvon Allen, Yegor Kolichov, Kavarius Hayes, John Egbunu. What we like: coming off of a trip to last year's Elite Eight, the Gators lost 3 of their top 4 scorers. Their starting center, John Egbunu, is still dealing with the recovery from a torn ACL. The good news is that the guy they did bring back is Kayvon Allen, the last year's leading scorer and one of the most dangerous and explosive scorers in the country. The Gators also add some quality newcomers to the mix. Yegor Kolichov and Jalen Hudson are talented transfers that will be eligible this season and provide some perimeter depth, and Mike White did bring in a solid recruiting class. What we don't like: Mike White has always been a guy that has played smaller lineups that pressure the ball, force turnovers, and just make life an all-around nightmare for opponents. He did that with this group last season, and much of the cause of that success was due to the ability of Justin Leon and Devin Robinson on that end. They were long, lanky, athletic defenders that were switchable and could make plays on that end. They're gone, and I'm not quite sure who is ready to fill that role. I'm also concerned about Chris Chioza at the point. He's not the defender that Casey Hill was, and if Florida's defense, which was second in the country last season, according to KenPom, is going to take a step back this season, that means they are going to need to make strides on the offensive end of the floor. Can Chioza lead the way offensively? 8. Kentucky Wildcats. Who's gone? De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, Bam Adebayo, Isaiah Briscoe, Derek Willis, Michael Mulder, Dominic Hawkins. Who do they add? Hamidou Diallo, Quade Green, Kevin Knox, Nick Richards, P.J. Washington, Jared Vanderbilt, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jamrell Baker. Projected starting lineup: Quade Green, Hamidou Diallo, Kevin Knox, Jared Vanderbilt, Nick Richards. What we like: there's not denying the talent on Kentucky's roster. They have 8 former 5-star recruits on their roster, 3 of whom spent last season with the program. They have size, they have length, and they have athleticism. Even without Jared Vanderbilt, who is dealing with an injury that could keep him out until January, there is enough potential on the defensive end of the floor to consider this group an SEC title contender and a threat to get to the Final Four. What we don't like: defense isn't going to be Kentucky's issue. Scoring the ball is. Part of it is going to be perimeter shooting. Simply put, Kentucky just does not have that many guys that can consistently knock down threes. If your team cannot consistently knock down threes, you cannot space the floor. It's that simple. But beyond that, the Wildcats don't exactly have a go-to guy. There is no one on this roster that is going to scare opposing coaches offensively. They don't have a Malik Monk or a De'Aaron Fox or a Karl Towns. They don't have anyone that is going to be impossible to stop one-on-one, and it's going to make them easier to guard. The bigger issue is that they don't exactly have someone that makes offense easy in critical possessions. When there are 12 seconds left and Kentucky is down by 1, who do you actually want getting a shot? That's something Coach Cal is going to have to figure out. 9. Cincinnati Bearcats. Who's gone? Troy Copane, Kevin Johnson. Who do they add? Keith Williams, Trevor Moore, Elielens Osim, Kane Broome. Projected starting lineup: Kane Broome, Jaron Cumberland, Jacob Evans, Gary Clark, Kyle Washington. What we like: Cincinnati's front court is absolutely loaded. Gary Clark is one of the nation's most underrated bigs, while Kyle Washington developed into a nice complementary piece alongside him. Throw in last year's leading scorer Jacob Evans, and that is going to be tough for any one opponent to match up with. And that's before you factor in the talent on the perimeter. Jaron Cumberland was super productive in limited minutes as a freshman, and Kane Broome averaged 23 points in the NEC before transferring to Cincinnati. It's a step up, and he won't put up those same numbers, but Broom can clearly play at that level. What we don't like. The big question I have is at the point guard spot. Losing Troy Copain is going to hurt. He was a veteran, he was a leader, and he was a point guard. Broom might be able to play that role, but he was a scorer first and foremost at his previous stop. Justin Jennifer hasn't proven to be a guy that can play major minutes yet, so who steps up for Mick Cronin beyond that? There isn't much I don't like here. They don't have the higher-end talent, and that caps their ceiling somewhat, but overall this is just a good, tough, veteran basketball team that is going to be a tough out for anyone. 10. USC Trojans. Who's gone? Charles Buggs. Who do they add? Derek Thornton, Charles Obanon, Jordan Usher. Projected starting lineup: Jordan McLaughlin, Anthony Melton, Elijah Stewart, Benny Boatwright, Chimezi Metu. There is a lot of talent on the USC roster for now, especially now that Metu, Stewart and Boatwright are all returning. The Trojans will push Arizona for the Pac-12 title if they decide to defend. What we like: there is a ton of talent on this USC roster, so much so that their second five might be able to go .500 in the Pac-12 this season. They're deep, they're long, they're athletic, and they're built precisely the way you would expect an Andy Enfield team to be built. The star is, well, I'm not really sure. It might be Jordan McLaughlin, the senior point guard that is criminally underrated nationally. It might be Chimezi Metu, although he might not actually be USC's best big man. That title may belong to Benny Boatwright. Then there is Anthony Melton, a potential NBA draft pick, and Elijah Stewart, a double-figure scorer that could end up in the league himself, and all of that ignores that there just so happens to be a former five-star point guard that is eligible to play this season in Derek Thornton. What we don't like: the biggest issue on the court for USC is going to be on the defensive end of the floor. They have yet to finish in the top 80 in defensive efficiency under Andy Enfield, and I'm not sure that changes this season. But perhaps more concerning is their part in the FBI investigation into corruption in college basketball. Tony Bland, an assistant coach on Enfield's staff for 4 years, has been arrested, and 2 unnamed players currently on the roster were linked to payments made by a financial advisor. Keep an eye out there. 11. Miami Hurricanes. Who's gone? Davon Reed, Kamari Murphy. Who do they add? Lonnie Walker, Chris Likes, Dungak, Sam Wardenberg. Projected starting lineup: Jacon Newton, Bruce Brown, Lonnie Walker, Anthony Lawrence, DeJuan Hoole. Losing Reed and Murphy will hurt, but Bruce Brown was one of the best kept secrets last year. Lonnie Walker is a big-time scorer, and DeJuan Hoole is a former top 30 prospect in line for a big bump in minutes this year. Jim Larinaga is exactly the coach to take advantage of this guard-heavy lineup, too. What we like: the guards on this roster are just so talented. Everyone in the ACC should know Jacon Newton by now. He may not end up being an All-American, but he is a very good college player. Bruce Brown and Lonnie Walker, however, could end up being All-Americans as well as lottery picks. Brown is the more intriguing of the two, as we've already seen him have success at the college level, and we know that he can play on the ball and operate in ball screens. If Miami wins the ACC, which I believe they can do, he'll play a major role. Walker is, by some accounts, the best shooting guard in the 2017 recruiting class, a big-time athlete and scorer that ended up picking Miami over programs like Villanova and Arizona. He could end up being a 15-point scorer. DeJuan Hoole is the name to watch here, as he is a former 5-star recruit and the most likely player to take over a starring role in Miami's front court. What we don't like: the loss of Davon Reed cannot be understated. He was a 6'6" wing with a 7-foot wingspan that was strong enough to hold his own in the paint, athletic enough to defend guards, shot 40% from 3 and could pop off for 20 points on any given night. He was a floor spacer, Miami's best perimeter defender, and the player that gave them lineup versatility. He let them play big or small. Can Anthony Lawrence, or anyone, fill that role? 12. Louisville Cardinals. Who's gone? Rick Pitino, Brian Bowen, Mangok Mathiang, David Levitch, Tony Hicks, Jalen Johnson, Donovan Mitchell. Who do they add? Malik Williams, Darius Perry, Jordan and WORA, Lance Thomas. Projected starting lineup: Quentin Snyder, VJ King, Dang Ottle, Ray Spalding, Anas Mahmoud. What we like: Rick Pitino was fired. David Padgett is the interim. Brian Bowen will not play for this team. We've known that for more than a month now. So let's talk about what this group actually has at their disposal, and there are a lot of quality pieces available. Dang Ottle, Quentin Snyder, VJ King, Ray Spalding, Malik Williams, Anas Mahmoud. These are all good SEC players, many of them veterans, that fit in well with the way that Louisville teams have played in recent years. On paper, the Cardinals should be near the top of the ACC. What we don't like, well, for starters they have a head coach that has never been a head coach before. So that's concerning, as is the fact that this is a group that has to be utterly exhausted with playing through scandal at this point in their career. And that's before we get to the fact that someone is going to have to take a major step forward this season. Louisville needs a star. Will it be Snyder, King, Otto? Someone needs to fill that role. 13. West Virginia Mountaineers. Who's gone? Tariq Phillip, Nathan Adrian, Tavon Myers, Brandon Watkins. Who do they add? Derek Culver, Brandon Epper, D'Angelo Hunter, Teddy Allen, Wesley Harris. Projected starting lineup: Javon Carter, Dexter Miles Jr., ESA Ahmad, Lamont West, Sagaba Kanate. What we like at this point, I'm just going to assume that Bobby Huggins is going to put a good team on the floor regardless of the situation. The names don't even matter. It's the system and the coach, and Huggs is going to get the players he needs onto his roster and figure it out from there. That said, Javon Carter is back for what feels like his 17th season in college hoops, and he just may be the best all-around player in the Big 12. ESA Ahmad seems primed for a monster year, but he'll miss the first half of the season as he tries to get eligible again. What we don't like, I'm not convinced that a pressing team has all that high of a ceiling. They rely on forcing opponents to make mistakes, and the one thing that good teams all have in common is that they have good guards, and good guards tend to make fewer mistakes than bad guards. 14. Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Who's gone? Steve Astoria, VJ Beecham. Who do they add? DJ Harvey, Nikola Jogo. Projected starting lineup: Matt Farrell, Temple Gibbs, Rex Pfluger, Bonzie Colson, Martinez Jebin. What we like at this point, I'm fine thinking of Notre Dame as the new Wisconsin. It doesn't really matter who is on the roster. We can just assume that the 2 or 3 years they've spent in the Notre Dame program has allowed them to develop enough that they will be able to carry the torch when it is their time. Matt Farrell and Bonzie Colson proved as much last season, and now it is time for Temple Gibbs and Rex Pfluger to do the same. What we don't like, the biggest issue with this team, is size up front. There are going to be times where Colson plays the 5 for the Irish, and he is all of 6'5", although his 7'2" wingspan and a lack of a neck mean that he plays much bigger than that. But someone is going to have to be able to provide minutes, toughness, fouls, and simply just eat some space in the paint for them. Is Martinez Jebin ready to be the guy? 15. Xavier Musketeers. Who's gone? Edmund Sumner, Malcolm Bernard, Rashid Gaston. Who do they add? Karam Cantor, Paul Scruggs, Najee Marshall, Elias Harden, Jared Ritter, Kentrevious Jones. Projected starting lineup: Quentin Gooden, JP Makura, Trevin Blewett, Kaiser Gates, Sean O'Mara. What we like, Trevin Blewett is back, a potential first-team All-American and Jalen Brunson's biggest contender for Big East Player of the Year honors. Blewett was the best player in the NCAA tournament for 3 weeks last season. Hell, if he hadn't sprained his ankle midway through league play, he might have won the Big East's top honor last season. There are other pieces on this roster to be excited about: JP Makura, Quentin Gooden, Karam Cantor, Xavier's freshman. But if Blewett had not returned, the narrative about this group would be much different. Right now, they have Final Four upside. What we don't like, the point guard spot is going to be a concern for this team. Quentin Gooden is coming off of a foot injury and is still learning how to play the position at the college level. He was pretty good in replacing Edmund Sumner last season, but he looked like a freshman that was thrust into the starting lineup unexpectedly midway through the season. Eventually, I do think that he will thrive in that role, but will that happen by league play or by his junior season? 16. Seton Hall Pirates. Who's gone? Madison Jones. Who do they add? Miles Cale, Darnell Brody. Projected starting lineup: Kadeen Carrington, Miles Powell, Daisy Rodriguez, Ishab Sanogo, Angel Delgado. What we like, I love the combination of youth and experience on this roster. The core of this team is a group of 4 seniors that have been building to this for 3 years. Angel Delgado is so much better than people realize, as in first-team All-American good, while Kadeen Carrington is a potential first-team All-Big East player. Daisy Rodriguez can be inconsistent, but when he's on, he's as dangerous as anyone in the league. That trio with high-level role players like Ishab Sanogo, Miles Cale and Miles Powell makes for a really dangerous basketball team. What we don't like, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I am somewhat concerned about Kadeen Carrington's transition to the point guard spot. He's spent his college career as a guy that is going to attack and try to score, and now he is being asked to change his mindset to be a facilitator, to be the guy that sets the rest of this team up. That's not easy to do. Carrington is talented, but being a point guard is a mindset as much as it is a skill. His adjustment will be critical to whether or not the Pirates will actually push Villanova in the Big East race. 17. North Carolina Tar Heels who's gone Justin Jackson, Kennedy Meeks, Isaiah Hicks, Nate Britt who do they add Jalik Felton, Cameron Johnson, Sterling Manley, Brandon Huffman, Andrew Platek, Garrison Brooks projected starting lineup Joel Berry 2, Kenny Williams, Theo Pinson, Luke May, Garrison Brooks. What we like, the Tar Heels are coming off of back-to-back national title game appearances, but they lose 3 key seniors from that team as well as Justin Jackson and Tony Bradley. Berry will be a National Player of the Year contender when he gets healthy, and I could make the argument that the experience the rest of this roster gets while he's out with a broken hand will make UNC better in the long run. Jalik Felton and Seventh Woods will be an interesting battle for playing time. What we don't like, this front line is not going to look like the front line of a typical North Carolina team. The best, most experienced player on the front line is Luke May, who had a couple of explosive performances last season, but who is nothing like a typical bully one-the-block big that we're used to seeing from Roy Williams. As much as any coach in the country, Williams wants to play with 2 big men. Will he actually be able to do that this year? His front line consists of May and a handful of freshmen that aren't exactly one-and-done candidates. That said, Cam Johnson and Theo Pinson are, in theory, good forwards for a small ball lineup. Can this old dog learn a new trick? 18. UCLA Bruins who's gone Lonzo Ball, TJ Leaf, Ike Anigbogu, Bryce Alford, Isaac Hamilton who do they add Jalen Hands, Chris Wilkes, Leon Gallo Ball, Cody Riley, Jalen Hill, Chris Smith projected starting lineup Jalen Hands, Aaron Holiday, Chris Wilkes, Cody Riley, Thomas Welsh. What we like, even after losing Lonzo Ball, Bryce Alford and Isaac Hamilton, the Bruins have a loaded backcourt, one as talented as any out west. Jalen Hands and Chris Wilkes are the prized freshmen in that group, and deservedly so. They're both quite talented, but the star of this show appears to be Aaron Holiday. The 6th man last season, Holiday is a talented playmaker and the kind of defender that UCLA desperately needs more of. He has a chance to be an All-American this season. That's not it either. Thomas Welsh is a veteran presence up front. Cody Riley and Chris Smith are both 4-star recruits that should have an impact immediately, and Prince Ali is a former 5-star prospect that is now healthy. There is no talent deficit in Westwood. That said, what we don't like, the issue that Steve Alford has had since he arrived at UCLA has been on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm not convinced those issues are going to be solved this season. It really is that simply. If UCLA guards, they have a chance to be really, really good. 19. Texas A&M Aggies who's gone J.C. Hampton, Javario Miller who do they add Dwayne Wilson, J.J. Caldwell, J.J. Chandler, T.J. Starks projected starting lineup Dwayne Wilson, Admin Gilder, D.J. Hogg, Robert Williams, Tyler Davis. What we like, this Texas A&M front line is so much better than you probably realize. It starts with Robert Williams, who would have been a top 10 pick in the 2017 NBA draft had he wanted to be a one-and-done player. Williams may not actually be the best player on that Aggie front line either, as the newly slimmed-down Tyler Davis might be the strongest player in college basketball. Throw in Tony Trachamarillos and DJ Hogg as floor spacers, and suddenly you have a group that can compete with anyone. What we don't like, I'm still not convinced that Billy Kennedy has found an answer at the point guard spot. He currently has 2 on his roster, freshman J.J. Chandler and redshirt freshman J.J. Caldwell, and neither of them started when the Aggies played Texas in an exhibition. Dwayne Wilson, a graduate transfer from Marquette, did. As good as that front line is, how much of an impact will they have if there aren't any guards on the floor that can get them the ball? 20. Minnesota Golden Gophers who's gone Akeem Springs who do they add Isaiah Washington, Jameer Harris, Devontae Fitzgerald projected starting lineup Nate Mason, Dupree McBrayer, Amir Coffey, Jordan Murphy, Reggie Lynch. What we like, Minnesota was the most surprising team in college basketball last season, as Richard Pitino went from the hottest hot seat to putting together a team that earned a number 5 seed. This group is built around terrific guard play, specifically Nate Mason, a tough and talented lead guard that has been perennially underrated nationally. Dupree McBrayer is more than capable, and Reggie Lynch is one of the nation's premier rim protectors, but the guy to watch here is Amir Coffey. He's that versatile, tall big wing that is en vogue in basketball right now. He's a potential first-round pick if he can boost that three-point percentage. What we don't like, how is Minnesota going to handle being the hunted this year? It's one thing to put together a tournament season that no one expected. It's an entirely different story to do so when everyone in the conference knows that you're a top 3 team and a major resume-boosting win. 21. Northwestern Wildcats who's gone, Sanjay Lumpkin, Nathan Taphorn who do they add Anthony Gaines, Aaron Falson, Rapolas Ivanauska's projected starting lineup Brian McIntosh, Scotty Lindsey, Vic Law, Aaron Falson, Derek Pardon what we like the Wildcats, a year removed from their first ever trip to the NCAA tournament, bring back essentially everyone from last season. Brian McIntosh will contend for Big Ten Player of the Year, while the pairing of Scotty Lindsey and Vic Law alongside him is an underrated perimeter. On paper, the Wildcats look like Michigan State's biggest threat in the Big Ten. What we don't like I'm not completely sold on Northwestern's front line. Derek Pardon is good at what he does, getting some boards, blocking some shots, finishing around the rim, but beyond that, there isn't all that much to discuss. The key may end up being the health of Aaron Falson, who started 32 games as a freshman and who can space the floor with his shooting, but replacing Sanjay Lumpkin will not be that easy. 22. St. Mary's Gales who's gone Joe Ran, Dane Pino who do they add Krista Zorks, Malik Fitz, Cullen Neal projected starting lineup Cullen Neal, Emmett Nar, Calvin Hermanson, Evan Fitzner, Jock Landale what we like the Gales are just so efficient on the offensive end of the floor. They've had a top 20 offensive with a top 3 effective field goal percentage in each of the last 2 years in which this core has been together. They have shooters everywhere on the floor, one of the best big men in the country in Jock Landale and a point guard and coach, who make ball screens look simple. They should be the best team in the WCC this season. What we don't like there is a lack of athleticism on the roster, which is part of the reason they have been up and down on the defensive end of the floor. There is also something of a concern with the addition of Cullen Neal, who has a reputation for being something of a gunner. But that concerns me less than this. I need to see this St. Mary's group prove it before I buy into them as something more than a first weekend tournament team. 23. Alabama Crimson Tide who's gone Nick King, Jimmy Taylor, Shannon Hale, Corbin Collins. Who do they add Colin Sexton, John Petty, Daniel Giddens projected starting lineup Colin Sexton, John Petty, Dazen Ingram, Braxton Key, Daniel Giddens. The Crimson Tide bring back a talented young core and add 2 5-star guards, including Colin Sexton, who could lead the conference in scoring. What we like Alabama was the number 10 defense in all of college basketball last season, according to KenPom, and they not only return the majority of that team, but they add Colin Sexton, who is the best scorer in the freshman class. Sexton isn't the only newcomer, either, as Avery Johnson brought in a loaded crop of newbies. John Petty should contribute major minutes, as should Ohio State transfer Daniel Giddens, but it's also worth noting that Braxton Key returned for his sophomore season. What we don't like there are a lot of ways that I can see this Alabama season going off the rails, and they all seem to involve Colin Sexton. He is a terrific scorer, but what if he doesn't perform on the defensive end of the floor the way that Alabama did last year? What if, as Alabama's point guard, he becomes just a little bit too shot-happy? And what happens if a show-happy Sexton doesn't get the calls that he got at the high school level? Perhaps the biggest question mark is in regards to his eligibility. A man that appears to be Sexton's father attended a dinner with a financial advisor and a member of the Alabama staff, who was paid $10,000 to set the meeting and has since been fired. 24. Gonzaga Bulldogs who's gone Nigel Williams-Goss, Press Makarnowski, Jordan Matthews, Zach Collins who do they add Jacob Larson, Zach Norville, Corey Kispert, Jesse Wade projected starting lineup Josh Perkins, Silas Melson, Zach Norville, Jonathan Williams 3, Killian Tilly. What we like there is actually a fair amount of talent on this Gonzaga roster. Josh Perkins, Silas Melson and Jonathan Williams 3 are all veterans that have played, and won, a lot of games. Killian Tilly and Rui Hachimura are young bigs with NBA upside. Zach Norville, Jesse Wade and Corey Kispert look like they're the core for Gonzaga's next generation. What we don't like the problem is that we don't really know if any of these guys are up for the roles they're going to be asked to play. Melson has never been the starting 2 guard. Perkins has been a starting point guard before, but he's never been the guy. Williams has, but that was on a bad Missouri team. Tilly and Hachimura are prospects more than products, and the 3 freshmen are, well, freshmen. The future is bright for Gonzaga. There's a lot of unknown in the present. 25. Purdue Boilermakers who's gone Caleb Swanigan, Basil Smotherman, Spike Albrecht who do they add Nigel Eastern, Sasha Stefanovic, Aaron Wheeler, Matt Harms projected starting lineup PJ Thompson, Carson Edwards, Dakota Mathis, Vince Edwards, Isaac Hass. What we like losing Caleb Swanigan would be a major blow for anyone, but the reigning Big Ten regular season champs should have enough left over to weather the storm. It starts with Vince Edwards, who was everything we wanted OG Anunoby to be last season. He's an underrated talent that provides valuable lineup versatility. Isaac Haas will hopefully be capable of playing more minutes this season, but the guy to be excited about is Carson Edwards. He was a double-figure scorer as a freshman and played well for Team USA in the U19 World Cup as well as for Purdue in the World University Games. What we don't like: the depth up front is going to be a real issue for Purdue, as the only bigs on the roster are a pair of slow-footed 7'2" players and a redshirt junior that has played in all of 18 games in his career. But what you may not have realized about this group is that they were far less reliant on post play than you may realize last year. They were 7th nationally in three-point percentage and 2nd in assist rate. Some of that was because defenses had to swarm Swanigan, but this wasn't just a one-man show.